Hell froze over. Oh my God, the Cleveland Cavaliers finally made a fucking move. Well, sort of, I guess. The Cavs have just finalized an agreement that will bring South Sudan Native and former Charlotte Hornet JT Thor to the Cavs via a two-way contract. Thor averaged 7 points and 5 rebounds for South Sudan during the Paris Olympics. And while this ain't exactly the move we hoped for earlier on when this offseason first began, it's still technically a move that adds to the front court. Nevertheless, we know that we needed a big out there. We know we needed somebody in that front court to add some type of depth behind that of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. And Thor, he does have some experience. He has appeared in 63 career games at the NBA level across 3 seasons and holds averages of 3.2 points, 2.1 rebounds, and 41.8% from the field, including, I believe, 32% from 3-point distance. Now, that to me, that last part is the most intriguing. He has knocked down 74 career triples. That is actually, ladies and gentlemen, more than Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen have in less career appearances. This to me hints at some floor spacing he might have in his arsenal. Takes care of one of the Cavs two ways and leaves two open, presumably for the likes of the recently Melbourne United departed Luke Travers and Amani Bates. I think that is probably going to end up being the 3-2-A. So now we got JT Thor. I think we're going to end up seeing Luke Travers finally come over to the Cavaliers in some capacity on that 2A. And I think Amani will also be back on the 2A as well. And I think that's what's going to end up happening with the 2As, which still leaves us with some flexibility, because without Isaac Okoro under contract, we still only have 12 players fucking roster right now. We got to do something. We got to get somebody in here. And I know a lot of this, really probably all of it is held up by JT. Not JT, Jesus. It's held up by Isaac. And so with no real moves being made to the actual roster, why not go ahead and take a chance on a prospect that still has some upside to him in a JT Thor? And I mean, you look at the guy, he's not old by any stretch of the imagination. He's just 21, will be 22 by the start of the season, if I'm not mistaken. So there's still a lot of untapped potential. And having brought in a coach like Kenny Atkinson, there is definitely a sense that player development is going to be at the forefront here. And so why not take a shot on a player like JT Thor, who has shown you some semblance of floor spacing, that protect the rim a bit, and has some positional versatility. Now, when you take a look at where he has traditionally lined up throughout his 3 seasons in the league, predominantly at the power forward. Just this past season for Charlotte and his appearances there, he played 83% of his minutes at power forward, 8% at small forward, which is kind of intriguing, because that kind of hints that maybe in some certain lineups, if he can develop that 3-point shot a little bit further on, that he could potentially give you some minutes at the 3 too. And he has some size to him at listed about 6'9", 6'10". That's big time to me. And he has also logged 8% of his minutes just this past season at center. So we have a player that could potentially line up or slide in at 3 different positions, a player that can defend at least 2 at the power forward and center position, and has shown a semblance of spacing. I mean, I look at what he has been able to do in terms of that 3-point shot, and it's just something that we haven't seen from Evan Mobley consistently enough, and it's certainly something that we have really not seen, at least in a Cavalier capacity, with Jarrett Allen. He actually has a 3-point shot. The shot mechanics, the form, it looks pretty legit. And playing for a Cavaliers team that could definitely give him more to work with in terms of, gravity and weapons around him, right? It is definitely miles ahead of what Charlotte had to offer him. When you have ball handlers like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, you still have Karis LeVert on the roster. You have a young rookie in Jalen Tyson who can handle. Craig Porter Jr. is here as well. There are just a number of players that probably could get him better looks that he had generated for him in Charlotte. And you see this, right? He's wide open for most of these looks. And so take it for what you will, but just having a front court player, specifically a 4 or 5, that is comfortable and confident in taking these shots, it makes you feel good. And so why not take a shot on him? He has that ability, and I like what I've seen from him in the past, and specifically watching him with at the Paris Olympics for South Sudan. Um, Showcased a lot, and I think he earned his way to another NBA contract, and it came via two-way fashion. And I know all of us were waiting to see what the Cavaliers were going to end up doing, and this is a move, right? It may not be a move to the main 15-man roster, but it is certainly a move that could yield results as the season goes on if they end up converting his contract over to a standard NBA deal if he performs adequately or if he is shown enough with the charge, right? And I mean, you just look at what he has been able to do on the opposite end of the floor as a rim protector. This stuff is all there, right? It's stuff that you like to see from your 4-5 man. He block shots at the rim. He can stay in front of his man. Yes, he has good hips. You can, his quick twitch movement out there. He can rotate. There are different things within his game that you see that leave you intrigued. And under a coaching staff that is going to go back to worrying about player development under Kenny Atkinson and company, feel pretty good. And so this is a solid signing. I see some people in here in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and address that real quick. Eric says, total disappointment this offseason. This guy is another end of the bench scrub. Is this the best Altman can do? This team isn't improved way behind the top Eastern Conference teams that added talent. So, Eric, honestly, man, while this offseason as a whole may feel like a downer, may feel like it's been a disappointment, and I understand that sentiment to a certain degree, it is also important to understand who is actually left on the market, right? At this point in time, we're in August, bro. I don't know what kind of move you would be expecting at this point in time. And without the Isaac Okoro situation settled, there just isn't much movement that can occur outside of a trade of a piece of the core forward. And with Donovan Mitchell extended, untouchable, he was never going anywhere. Darius Garland, still possible that he's moved, but based upon everything that we've heard from Kenny Atkinson and Kobe Allman, I really don't see a move for him this season. I mean, unless things are just down the shitter. And Jarrett Allen just extended. Evan Mobley just extended. Nobody in that core is moving. So, I mean, I don't know what kind of, at this point in time, I don't know what kind of acquisition people are expecting. We're picking from a very, very, a very, very poor cast here, right? And I don't mean that to sound harsh, but that's just the reality of the situation. It's a very, 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 very watered down market right now, especially for bigs. It's either has-beens, guys who have never really contributed at the NBA level, or prospects with potential. And that's what JT Thor is. He has potential. He just needs to be in the right place to develop, and he has to be given an opportunity. Dude is just 21 years old, will be 22 by the time the season starts. And he has shown some of those things that we are still needing out of our front court, mainly that floor spacing ability. And so why not? I mean, this is what two-way contracts are for. We already know that Amani Bates is likely going to be back on one. We know that Luke Travers, all indications and reports suggest that Luke Travers is going to get one of the other two ways. And now we just signed JT Thor. So it makes sense. This is what these contracts are for. In terms of main roster additions, it's still probably going to boil down to whoever's left on the market once Isaac Okoro is situated, whether he signs the qualifying offer or they're able to come to agreement on some type of multi-year extension, which honestly, I'm starting to feel like is less and less likely. Sign and trade is still on the table for him, but at the end of the day, I mean, we're probably not making any moves at all until the Isaac Okoro situation is resolved. And if we do, they have to kind of they kind of figure out how to stave off luxury tax implications. And it's a very difficult dance to do at this point in time. I know there's a lot of talk around Gershon Yabusele, a guy that I would love to see in Cleveland, especially now that we have signed a technical 4-5 in JT Thor. But there just really isn't much else to be done right now. So all the names that we wanted to be brought to Cleveland, they're all off the board. They came off very early, and even some of the guys that are, you know, that are on the back end of their careers and that could potentially still help a team in some capacity, you're going to be taking a chance on just about everybody at this point in time. So I mean, it's just really this is what we're working with. The roster, it sucks that we're entering the season with basically the same roster outside of Jalen Tyson and now JT Thor, but this all season was probably always going to be more about retention than addition, right? Re-signing Donovan Mitchell, getting him to sign on the dotted line, getting Evan Mobley on a rookie scale max extension, and then adding to Jarrett Allen's value by giving him additional years on his contract. That was unforeseen, but at the end of the day, it was still something that could potentially help out in the future when you're talking about if you want to pivot off from him and move him in the future. It makes his contract more valuable. And so this is just where we're at right now. I say all this to say this is where we're at right now. So hopefully, as the season draws near, maybe you feel a little bit better about the direction the team is going in. But if not, that's okay too. Cedric Taylor says, excellent pickup. I hope we can pick up the shooting guard off that South Sudan team as well. I think it's a pretty solid addition as far as things go, especially at the 2A spot. I mean, you can't really ask for anything more out of a 2A, a guy that you are literally asking to develop, right? A guy that you're asking to view the possible potential that he has as a prospect. That's exactly what JT Thor is. Michael McMahon says, or would you guard JT Thor on the perimeter? A little confused. Michael also says, if the post playoff run Derrick Jones Jr. gets $10 million a season, then how can Okoro expect 12 to 15 million? I just don't think it's likely. I don't think it was ever likely after the poor playoff showing that Isaac had that he was going to get money in that range. It never seemed likely. It never seemed possible to me that he would get paid the money that he apparently wants to be paid after having now back-to-back postseasons where he's just kind of been non-existent on the offensive side of the ball. I think Isaac kind of dug his own grave. I hate to say that, but at the end of the day, that's literally how it has made me feel. He just has failed to capitalize on all the open space that he had in back-to-back postseasons against Orlando, against New York, and against Boston to close out the 2023-24 season. So I think it sucks for him, but he kind of put himself in this position. I think it was either 9 of 36. I think he went 9 of 36 or 9 of 35 from 3-point distance in this past season's playoffs. That just is not going to cut it for a player that is expecting to be paid. Now, all accounts out there, all reports indicate that Isaac was offered a deal in the area of $8 to $10 million. That is what we continue to see reported. We don't have the actual numbers, obviously, but I have to believe that is what he is being offered by the Cavaliers. And to me, it's always the age-old conversation between, okay, do I want to take long-term security and sign a multi-year contract for money that I don't feel maybe I feel like I'm a little bit worth more than what I'm being offered. But at the same time, you get that long-term contract. And so if you, in the event of an injury, you can at least fall back on that money that you've gotten. Or you can bet on yourself for the qualifying offer and take a chance. And we always know what the caveats are with that. There is potential injury risk with that. There's the potential that you may not be given enough time to actually showcase that you are worth the money that you are betting on yourself to get. And that is very, very possible with the addition of Jalen Tyson, with Karis LeVert still being on the roster, with Ty Jerome coming back, and a number of other players that will be getting minutes at the position that he plays at, i.e. Sam Merrill, i.e. Max Strus. It goes on and on. And so you're taking a risk either way if you're Isaac Okoro, but at the end of the day, I mean, you kind of put yourself in this situation. And as big of an Isaac fan as I am, sometimes you just have to, you got to make a decision. And that's what he has to do. I can't make it for him. You can't make it for him. He has to make it for himself. And so hopefully his representation is trying to push him in the right direction. Cleveland Paul says, I think a lot of people are frustrated about this offseason because it seems like Altman is operating like we are a couple games away from an NBA championship when that's not the case. And I think that's fair. I think that's fair to suggest that. I guess my question would be, what were we expecting from this offseason? What were we expecting from this offseason? If after you watch the Cavaliers, after the 2023-24 season ended and you expected one of Jarrett Allen or Darius Garland to be moved, if you expected Karis LeVert to be moved, if you expected George Niang to be moved or some type of move along the margins, it always seemed to me like none of those things were really likely to happen just because Darius Garland's value plus his contract just not great heading into the 2023-24 offseason. Not great. Jarrett Allen still had some value around the league, obviously, as we continue to see reports suggesting that numerous teams were interested in pursuing him. Whatever offers the Cavaliers were getting for him probably just weren't enough. And in Kobe Altman's eyes, it's just one of those things where you don't want to move the asset for less than you feel like they're worth, or if you feel like hiring a new head coach could give you a bump in the current rotation and roster that you have. And I think Kobe probably thought that, hey, I'm sold on this core four. I want to see what this core four can do with a new head coach, a new voice, a new offensive scheme in mind. And so I get that. And then Pulse also says real NBA backup big and upgraded wing position at the least, and neither has been achieved. And I think that's fair to suggest that we all want depth at that front court position. We all want somebody who can actually step in and provide rotation caliber minutes behind Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. We all do want that to occur. We also wanted to upgrade the wing position. But let's just be real. Max Strus entrenched as the starter, you are never going to really upgrade that position. Where I mean, if you're talking about upgrading the position as a whole, I guess that's an entirely different argument. If you're making if you're making a point to upgrade like starting level talent there, let's say you're trying to move on from Max Strus or you're trying to upgrade at that point, I just never thought that was really likely because you're going to have to give up an asset in return that teams actually saw as, that can move the needle. And Jarrett Allen was probably the only piece that was going to be able to accomplish that. And not many teams out there were really in the market for his position at center, right? New Orleans, I guess, but the only players that Cleveland probably would have been able to truly upgrade would have been Brandon Ingram, and that's kind of that's a stretch right there, in my opinion, because as you guys know, I've never really truly been a huge fan of Brandon Ingram. He is an all-star caliber talent when he's healthy, when he's on, but the contract combined with the health issues, it just has never been something that has truly intrigued me with him. So that was really it. And so if we wanted to upgrade the wing position group as a whole, yeah, there were free agents out there that you could have brought in. I really had wanted a guy like Kyle Anderson. I thought he could have helped players like that. But if you're talking about upgrading the starting position, like finding somebody who fits better than Max Strus or somebody who is better than Max Strus overall, I just never thought that was likely. In terms of the backup big, though, I'm completely with you. I really wanted to see somebody brought in, which is why I was so down in the dumps that they did not draft Aron Holmes. And, I kind of sucks what happened with him with the injury and whatnot, but they still could have addressed it in the free agent market as well. But I have to believe that this Isaac Okoro situation is what has just basically stunted it all. It has kept it behind because they're trying to figure out how to walk the thin line with this new luxury tax implications that you could have stemming from the new CBA. So it was always going to be a tough dance, a tightrope walk for Kobe Altman to do. Mona Moreland says, bring on Boban. I mean, again, at this point in time, you're taking a shot on anybody. But I think JaVale McGee is still out there. Boban Marjanovic is still out there. There are a number of other players that are still technically on the market that you could maybe take a chance on. Omer, you're 7. I think Cody Zeller is still on the market. Orlando Robinson, Moses Brown, Harry Giles. I mean, these are all names that we're like, we can list off all the live long day, but at the end of the day, none of these guys are probably true rotation caliber backups. They would just be pressed into action. And that's where we're at with this signing. Reaper 23 says, I read or watched somewhere about a trade involving Karras and some picks for DFS. Would you do that, Mac? No. There was a trade the other day that suggested that we trade George Niang and I think it was 4 second round selections. I would do that. And that does sound like a lot just when you say it, right? 4 second round picks and a player in George Niang who is probably due for a bounce back season after just a very, very up and down 2023-24 season in which he just kind of seemed very inconsistent, very Jetty Osmond like in that regard from 3-point distance. But the point is, it sounds like a lot when you say it, but when you think about what DFS could potentially offer you in terms of positional versatility, in terms of shot making from the perimeter, in terms of defense, I think that deal would be worth it because at the very least, he would give you a player that you could actually play 3 through 5 in certain lineups, a guy who is a known shooter. It hasn't necessarily been efficient over the last couple of seasons since moving from Dallas to Brooklyn. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think it would be worth it. You can always recoup second round selections. And with DFS, there's also the inherent risk of taking him on because if I'm not mistaken, he only has 1 year left on his current deal. So he's going to need another contract. He could only be a 1-year rental. So there are always caveats that apply. But to answer your question, no, I would not trade Karis LeVert in picks for DFS. I don't think it would be worth it. Yeah, just not worth it. Not worth it, in my opinion. Beast Girl says Cavaliers might win the NBA Cup. I mean, with the group selection that we got, with the teams that we're likely to play, yeah, I think that it should definitely be something that is up there. I think the Cavaliers will take on Chicago on November 15th. We have Boston on November 19th. That's a big matchup, by the way. Key matchup. First time they will see Boston this upcoming season since that second round series. We'll take on the Hawks on the 29th, and then we'll have the Wizards on the 3rd. And so the only team that really scares me out of that group, obviously, is Boston. And so I think that we should definitely be able to make some noise. Beast Girls also says, damn, I'm looking at this Christmas schedule. The Cavaliers ain't had a Christmas game since LeBron was here. So let me just ask you this. The matchups that we are seeing on Christmas Day, because Christmas Day to me is all about, one, you have storylines, and two, you have name appeal. You have name appeal is a big part of that, I believe. And so Donovan Mitchell obviously is a big draw, but is he a big enough draw compared to some of the other names that are playing on Christmas? I don't know. And I'm not saying that as a slight to Donovan. It's just kind of Cleveland. It just, unless LeBron is suiting up, it just was never likely to happen. It sucks that it didn't. I would have liked to have seen like a Boston or Orlando Cavs matchup, something like that on Christmas Day, but I was never expecting it. Never something that crossed my mind. But overall, I mean, I wasn't coming on here to talk long term with you guys, but I'm glad that we finally did something. I'm glad that we finally have some acquisition to talk about because it's really just, it's been a dull off season. outside of re-signing some of these core pieces and firing and hiring a head coach. That's all the offseason has been. Oh, and Jalen Tyson, who's looks very, very intriguing. Looks like he's going to be a day one contributor, but there just hasn't been a lot to talk about in terms of Cleveland basketball. It sucks, but it is what it is. We'll probably see at least 1 to 2 more things happen. I believe that Amani Bates and Luke Travers are going to be getting those other 2 ways. I believe that Isaac Okoro is likely to come back at least for this upcoming season at the beginning of the season on either a qualifying offer or a multi-year extension. And I think that we make one more move, which will leave this team heading into the 2024-25 season with an open roster spot. And that to me is important because not only does it give you flexibility in terms of moves at the deadline or at the buyout market, but it also gives you an opportunity to convert one of the two-way deals into a standard contract if you want. Let's say that JT Thor is providing the Cavaliers exactly what we want from a backup 4-5. Maybe they consider converting his contract. Let's say that Amani Bates, this looks like a complete sharpshooter. It looks a lot better than he did in this past summer league. Maybe they convert his deal, or same thing with Luke Travers. I don't know. But having that open roster spot heading into the season, to me, that's important because it gives you that flexibility. And so I'm expecting the 2 ways to be filled completely. And I'm expecting Isaac Okoro to return, and I'm expecting 1 more roster addition. Maybe that's Gerson Yabusele. Maybe it's JaVale McGee. Maybe it's somebody else. But at the end of the day, that's where we find ourselves. Reaper 23 says, who would you rather see rotation minutes at, Tyson or Monty? Tyson, hands down. I mean, that to me is not even a question that's up for debate. I like Amani. I still think he has a ton of untapped potential, but Tyson to me has shown enough that he warrants an immediate look within the rotation, if not be the first man up. Because if Isaac returns, like I think he will, the minutes might be harder to come by. But the good thing that I can say is that Kenny Atkinson is like the antithesis of JB Bickerstaff in terms of going deep into your rotation. He will play 9, 10, maybe even 11 deep at times to keep guys fresh and to keep everybody happy, right? So I certainly think it's possible. I don't think Amani is even a remote threat because technically Amani's not even on the roster, right? We assume that he's going to be given that 2-way, but Tyson is on the roster. And I think that anybody who watched him during the summer league can see what he brings to the table in terms of the rebounding, in terms of the shot creation, in terms of the playmaking, the facilitation, and kind of looking like an underrated defender at times. And he has size. Tyson looks like the real deal out there. So give me Tyson all the live long day in that regard. But as I always tell you guys, if you'd like to reach out to me, you know how you can. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you want to be added to this Cavalier Discord chat, you know what to do. Leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of said review to itscavalier53@gmail.com, and I will add you. And if you want to support the podcast in a small but helpful way, consider becoming a member over on Patreon. The link will be in the description of this video. That said, go Cavs. Have a good weekend.